we just started recording. So you're just collecting information on so many different stakeholder types. As you know, you've got the employees, you've got your participants, suppliers, partners, funding bodies, the whole support network around a customer as well, agency employees, plan managers, support coordinators, other service providers, as we were discussing before, doctors, healthcare professionals, allied health, legal representatives. There's just so many different types of stakeholders, and the information you'll collect on them is going to vary by type. So being able to configure and customize your data sets to be able to collect that different information is so important. So I don't know, Jess, if you've got any questions or any prompts on that specific topic, on the types of stakeholders.
I guess it'd be interested to know your view, I guess, on when a stakeholder does offer multiple different types of services, or they might be multiple types of stakeholders, or multiple types of a stakeholder, how you determine which is their primary and if that is important or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's actually, that's a really good point in that an individual stakeholder can belong to more than one group or more than one type. And I think it's important to be able to measure that. So you need to recognize that they do have many relationships and be able to record that. At the same time, you do need to know what their primary relationship is, because that's going to denote, particularly when reporting, when you need to report on one stakeholder by type, that is the one that you're going to use. So yeah, often you might have a customer or participant, for example, who happens to also be a parent of a participant. And it's really important that you recognize them as the primary, that they are a customer of yours, but at the same time, you need to know that they are also a parent of another participant or customer receiving supports. Yeah, so you need to measure both, basically, the fact that they cover more than one type, and that will denote then the different information you'll collect, but also what their primary type is. That's a really good point. Yeah. And I guess, as we mentioned, the varying types of information, but also the access to that can be really important. So being able to manage the who has access to the different stakeholder information and be able to control that either by type or by their primary or by other data that you're collecting against their stakeholder. And it's not just from maintaining a level of confidentiality or ensuring that somebody doesn't have access to information that they don't need, or ability to export information that you don't want them exporting. I'd say it's also about the efficiency of access to that information. So the ability to customize the information that somebody or a user consumes on a stakeholder based on what they need to provide to perform their task, their job, so that they do it in the most efficient way possible. Yeah, that's really important too. And really, any questions on that, or I go on to just the level of information by relationship in terms of the organization to the stakeholder, but more how that relationship changes over time. So the example there would be, as you know, like you have a inquiry or a lead through to developing a sales or service opportunity, through to actually onboard it or assessing and then onboarding a customer or a participant. And the level of information you're going to collect on the stakeholder is going to change over the time with that changing relationship. And getting that right is really important, I mean, to managing your costs and just really managing workload. So inquiry stage might be incredibly limited information and quite varied as well, because you don't know what information they're going to provide. As that changes to more of a formalized opportunity, the level of information you're going to collect will increase. So, and the type of opportunity that you have is going to denote what level of information you'll collate as well. Because if it's a really simple, small service, you just can't invest in the amount of time to collect too much information. Whereas if it's like a supported independent living service, you can obviously collect far more information. yeah, which because of the sheer size of the service that you're going to offer and what you would need to do to manage the risks of providing that service. So recognizing those changes in the stage of the relationship, if you will, and therefore the information you're going to collect as part of your process, I think is super important. Have we got any other questions in the chat? Sorry, I've got a little orange icon coming up. Oh no, it's just you saying you'll be right back, Amy. That's Jess, any other questions on that, or anyone any questions on that at all?
No, not on that area. It'd be great if anybody had any, I guess if they faced any challenges in that transition previously or anything. No.
I guess for Cara, I guess just for Cara, we often do get calls from support coordinators asking if we can provide a service or not, and they just want a simple yes or no. And very often it depends on 1,000 other things. So some people may get frustrated when at intake stage, just a lead stage, we're still trying to determine whether we're the right provider for them with very little information.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a science to get to the point where you can make that decision as quickly as possible, so that you don't invest heavily in it, and also you can provide a
and try to
prompt
keep
response
them warm
back
at the same time while they're warming up to us, that we can get more and more information from them. Absolutely.
That's true.
It's hard.
It is hard, and even gaining the like for example on a lead or an inquiry stage, I guess what you've got you should have the option to collect quite a varied level of information. Is you might not be able to provide a service at that point in time, but the gathering of that information may form the basis to offer a new service at some point in the future, or even an existing service that's changed by its nature, which now means it's viable to provide that service at a future date. So maintaining that information, revisiting it at a future point as well, can be crucial.
But the support coordinator is a stakeholder themselves within the relationship status as well. So even reviewing that, we've had 3 phone calls from service coordination A, with that user. B, collating that information that if there is a service opportunity, an organisation can put that together and go back to that support coordination team, say, hey, we understand you've had 3 or 4 inquiries about this product and service. Can we see if we can facilitate a service that meets the needs for the clients or the participants that you're calling in for? So there's a number of stakeholders throughout that journey.
Yeah. One thing we've also done is we've asked our stakeholders, our support coordinators, whether there's anything that we can do to improve the intake and onboarding process.
Yeah.
Just because we do understand that support coordinators all work very differently. Some are very happy to give you all the information at the onset, and others are cagey about as much information as they can be, because they don't want to give their customers' details away, I don't know, just because of their strict privacy protocols, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it will vary. I guess if they've got different privacy arrangements as well with each participant, then it might vary of what information they are able to provide by participant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. Sorry, buddy.
Jess wanted to add something in there.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and on top of that as well, the investment that they are willing to put onto providing all that detail, because as we all know, it can be quite time consuming, collating and providing the level of information that is needed to make a decision, which is what you were saying earlier, Bonnie, as well.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Actually, while we're on the topic of support coordination, I guess one area of interest I've got is just how the information on support coordinators themselves are being procured and entered into systems now, because I can kind of see that as something that could be done almost externally, because somebody could be like, as a provider, having access to an up-to-date list on all of the support coordinators that you might want to send out your material to, or what services you can provide, and have that information kept up to date in your system. I could certainly see as would be really beneficial, and it's actually not internal information, if that makes sense. That's information that's available externally that could be brought into your system.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we have been looking at is how we engage with one support coordination organisation who supports multiple of our customers, and how we engage with them when, let's say, we hear their support coordinator has left, and we can then easily, just look up which customer that, or which customers are connected to that particular support coordinator, and then at a flick of a switch just do a quick transition to another support coordination organisation or another support coordinator, just depending on what it is that the customers want. But just having that data and that information connected from organisation or individual to our customers, being able to view it quickly is so important to us.
I think that's a really good point. So this is these scenarios, Bonnie, like where, say, if a support coordinator went bankrupt or into administration for whatever reason, that relationship would end for many participants in one go, and so you'd need to be able to update that across a whole series of participants, and possibly even play some sort of role in assisting them to, obviously manage their supports or find another coordinator.
Yeah.
I guess that probably brings up the point of managing a stakeholder like a support coordinator in their own right, rather than just having them as a contact against each participant. Similar with even a doctor type relationship as well, because if they change, even if their contact numbers change, you've got to go in and update every single participant that has a relationship with the coordinator, rather than just updating the coordinator itself.
Yeah. Well, luckily we don't have that issue in our current system.
No.
We have seen in our research quite a few systems that do. They manage a lot of one-to-one relationships, and for us that it's an unsustainable business process to be able to do that. So ensuring that the system that you're running your CRM or you're running your stakeholders on can have that many-to-many relationship is really important.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the way I like to describe it is that the relationship in itself is a unique data point, because the relationship can be different between two different stakeholders as well. And so the measuring or the collection of information directly on that relationship and being able to describe them to managing that data really well.
Yep.
Yeah, and then being able to, like, one area on this is then you kind of can get to the point where you could really then leverage that to improve, obviously, the customer experience as well, because you've got all the relationships. If you understand the nature of them, you're collecting every single touch point and records that you have, and you're able to then reference those back to the stakeholders. Any new contact that comes in, you've got that history there to be able to respond to it accordingly, or even just shape the services that you provide based on that level of information. So then getting the communications right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's good. Yes. Any other questions at all?
So very similar to what Bonnie mentioned as well, actually, was, I guess, having and what you're referring to, having the stakeholder as their own entity and linking that via the relationship obviously opens up a whole nother level of reporting. Some, even just the increased accuracy of the number of stakeholders, whether that be participants or support coordinators, but also then getting more accurate reporting or improving process efficiencies. The example I had was very similar to Bonnie's, but in the case of a doctor retiring, having a look to see how many participants that affects and trying to get ahead of that. So it becomes really important, I guess, in a number of ways with support coordination doctors. Is there any other sort of reports that anyone can think of that would be very beneficial, just to get one step ahead of, I guess, any changes to a participant's life based on their contacts being updated? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and it probably comes back to as well the integrity of the information and keeping that up to date. I think one of the key reporting in this area would be actually just on the integrity of the information, because optimizing all of those touch points would really leverage from that. So seeing when key stakeholder details, address details, and so on were last updated, and having prompts to review that is really important. And then, yeah, I guess you could do that and via a report, but almost via a direct request within any system as well, based on any change or based on any lack of change over a period of time, might be a good way of actioning that too. Yeah.
What
Sorry,
we did in our system is we built in a capability to be able to pull reports on which people make which type of decisions for our customers. Because we have so many different types of decision makers. We have those who can authorize restrictive practices, those who can make decisions around whether they're vaccinated for COVID, and then those who make decisions around their NDIS supports. So those are just 3 examples of the types of decision makers that we had. So we built into the system a way that we could pull a report on, well, let's just see who needs to get their COVID vaccination and who can authorize that booster, for example. And we used that data because in the beginning it was quite tedious in the beginning without having that capability. And now what we're finding is we're probably going to need to do a similar undertake a similar type mini project with the restrictive practices, because the decision makers around restrictive practices are changing.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's the level of detail that exemplifies the level of detail needed on the nature of the relationship, because you've got multiple relationships in there just on the topic of decision making alone.
Yes, absolutely. And we have no control over it, and it changes all of the time.
Yeah.
Is that in relation, Bonnie, for restrictive practice? Is that consent from a family guardian to then seek the consent from DHS or the AP officer, or is that assigning, I guess, an AP officer or a DHS member to each participant?
Yeah, it'll be assigning a role to each participant as the authorizing officer.
Okay, so
and
internal.
and removing the guardian as the person who could authorize.
Yep.
So I guess we, rather than assign individuals, we'd probably assign the roles, and we'd complete those fields as to who fills that role. As and when the roles change and evolve, I should imagine.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just it's one additional bit I reported as well. I mean, would be to leverage that partner network in those stakeholder relationships. So a support coordinator is probably an obvious one, but even doctor type relationships, if you've got a doctor that clearly a large number of your customers are using, I think it's a fair bet that there could be customers of other organizations using them as well. And that could be a good avenue to get material about the services that you provide and start to build relationships with that network that you could get mutual referrals or promote your services as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're all about within the intake space, is referrals.
Yeah. And that partner network is so key, that complementary referral system.
Yeah. Yep.
Where someone else provides a good service as well that's complementary to yours.
And the ability to document that against your single source of truth or your single stakeholder as well. The example is, made a phone call to speak about person A, and I was there, follow up about person B as well, knowing that's on the system, being able to refer through that single point of stakeholder truth is really important. And it's efficient as well, and it's respectful too for those stakeholders' time.
Yeah. Yep. Indeed.
Brilliant. Okay. The only other last point what Adam's alluded to there is the importance of that single source of truth, which is really, I guess, vital with stakeholder information. And I guess just identifying, at least if you've got multiple systems with information in on stakeholders, at least identifying which one the primary is for any individual data source. And I've taken it a step further, keeping them in sync, and a step further below that, eliminating sources of data that are not required and working off a single database or single unified namespace, as we call it, or a unified data set. Particularly stakeholder information, you do not want to be having to manage or not knowing which information about a particular stakeholder is the correct one or not. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I've taken up the whole meeting again. Sorry.
No, that's thank you all. Yeah, it's a scene. We've just gone over time. So yeah, thank you everyone for your input. This is our first webinar, so it's been a learning experience for us as well, and I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming along.
Yep. Thank you very much. I look forward to